Welcome back to Wealth Mavericks, the podcast where we help doctors unlock the secrets to building generational wealth.
And today we're talking about the last few episodes that we've been covering a lot of different topics, and we've been talking a lot about the logic of everything and how it all makes sense. Are you willing to do the work your goals require? And some of that might feel uncomfortable to you. Sometimes the decisions we make, they're just so focused on the logic. They're so focused on, yet this is the right decision, that we extract the joy from living day to day. There's another side to all of this, and it's the personal decision side. It's the personal, mental, emotional side of all this. And I think there's a lot of times where things can make perfect logical sense and still doesn't feel right. Or just, I don't know, why do any of us make the decisions that we make when the logic is there, but we just choose not to? And so I did want to explore that with you guys. We've been talking about, cash value life insurance. We've been talking about paying off your mortgage and all these things that, while they make good logical sense and they are about finance, they are about dollars and cents, there's some emotion behind all of this. When you start talking about life insurance with people, you guys have probably noticed this, conversation turns pretty morbid pretty quickly. Right? You're talking about the end of someone's life in many, many cases. When you talk about paying off someone's home, Aaron, we've had many of these conversations with members where one of their goals is, I want to pay off my mortgage. I'm completely debt free. There's an emotional attachment to that. So I just wanted to take a little bit of time in this episode and explore more that's going on than just the dollars and cents and the logic.
And one thing I love about what we do in our Freedom Roadmap that people have not gone through this exercise before, and it's very powerful. We not only help them identify their goals, which is pretty common in the financial space, but we put a date to it. We put a dollar amount to it, which is the logical part of it. But then we ask them, okay, put yourself in that moment. It's this date and you've achieved this goal. What do you see? Who are you with? Like, what is happening in that moment? And some people are very logical. They're like, well, I see a zero balance on my mortgage, or I see my statements at this. Whereas others are more touchy-feely and they're like, oh, I'm sitting by the fire with my wife and I'm not at the office and I can go golfing later today. And like it's fun to put yourself in that moment. And then we say, what are some words for how you're feeling in that moment? And it's like, again, some people are like, good, I feel great. And then others, I'm euphoric, I'm ecstatic, I feel so free, I feel so calm, but when you can walk them through that and help them experience what they will see and feel, it just makes it so much more real to them. So I think that's a good place to start, is like, have you given thought to, if and when you reach that goal, how's it going to feel? And if there's no emotion there, then maybe it's not the best decision. And you need to further explore, what are the goals I can have that will move me more emotionally, because that tells you something.
Right. And I think, there's, I've done a lot of work in the longevity space, right? So how do we live better longer? And a lot of science around that. And there's a lot of conjecture around that. All these doctors have probably seen and heard some of the presentations, a lot of big talking heads about it. Really, what we know is the only thing that we can stand on factually and actually support scientifically is the way to live longer, to extend your life longer, is severe calorie restriction. CR, right? Calorie restriction. That's the only way that's like scientifically proven that will extend your life. But people are like, who would want to live that life? Right? Life sucks. You have no calories. You're constantly in hunger pains. Why would you want to live longer if that was the case? So my point in bringing that story up is, I think sometimes the decisions we make, they're just they're so focused on the logic. They're so focused on, yet this is the right decision, that we extract the joy from living day to day. And so again, this comes into like all these decisions when someone's making a decision about what house to buy. Well, what house can you buy? Meaning, like, what house will the banks lend you up to versus what's the house that I should buy in order to accomplish the goal that I have. And I think in the vacuous space of not having thought about this, you're going to be fed whatever you're fed. And that is borrow to the maximum, live, nicest home in the best neighborhood with the best schools and all of that. So then by default, you just follow that path emotionally, because you haven't really thought about it. And I think that's a big gift that we give to a lot of our members. It's early in membership where we start talking about these things and we bring out their goals in very, very tangible ways. I have I have clients that I've worked with for decades, and it's such a joy on the back end of all these goals having been accomplished. And we're going to have one of these people on our podcast at some point talking about the impact of coaching, and how that can shift things. So I think in as much as what everything that Bob is saying on this channel is accurate, it's factual. What's the human emotion and decision that goes behind that? And Bob, I mean, you've done this for such a long time. You've seen people make what feel like very terrible decisions based on emotion. So there's the bad side of that. But you've probably seen people make good decisions that have turned out okay, uh, because of those emotions. What's been your experience with that with people?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think where the two meet and they intersect out in the middle of nowhere, is a little bit of both of those, the emotion and the logic. I've seen some members make emotional decisions, and it was good for the family. We feel good about ourselves, and as you know, there's a health to that as well. You feel happy, right? You've made
Mm-hmm.
that decision. Um, when it comes to the numbers and the logic, that always wins. But at the end of the day, if the individual feels happy and healthy and feels good, that's what matters, right? Because we're the logic, the numbers is about something else,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, like, for example, we use this example of real estate. I have a couple members that have a handful of single family rentals. They bought them in the late 90s, early 2000s, and they've appreciated quite a bit. But now there's so much equity in these that I've been telling them for the last 3-4 years, maybe even longer, that you need to sell these because you bought low and now they've appreciated. You're never going to earn enough income from this investment to match the equity you now have. It's money that's just sitting there, makes no sense. That's the logical. The emotional is, yeah, but I want to give something to my kids. And I've had these for a long time. He saw success in the logic of, he made a logical decision when he first bought it. And that
Mm-hmm.
logic doesn't continue. The logic turns into emotional at this stage,
Mm.
right? My logic says, get rid of it. It's an investment. It's not your personal house. In fact, they already sold their personal house and upgraded and made more money. So they did this with their personal house.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, these properties, they want to give them to their kids. And my answer is, well, you still can do that. It's just not these three. The equity can still be put into a bigger asset, something that's doing more for you guys. It's helping your kids have something, and it helps you guys in the meantime as well.
Right.
Just really married to those.
Right.
But he feels good about it. But now when he's having a tough time trying to rent them out because of the way that there's the logic to it, it does now start causing emotions that are
Right.
negative emotions, that aren't happy emotions. And so I think that's where really kind of the two meet together in the middle of nowhere. What's that look like?
Right.
Right?
And
And
Bob,
I
The
and
extremes of both
right.
are bad.
we saw several examples of this with members just this week where, again, we're going through the asset maps, we're showing them everything they have. And several of the couples, they have an extremely high amount in liquid savings. And I think in both cases, it's the wife who feels very emotionally attached to having the security of a lot of money in savings, like just in case. But logically, it's like that money. If the worst were to happen, you have all kinds of ways to cover that emergency. You really don't need this money here, and it could be doing so much more for you and your future, and to get you to your goals so much faster. But the emotion is just too heavy. So at what point is it like, okay, we're just going to let you keep that because that emotion, that feeling of security to you is so important. Because at some point we can't force them.
Right. And we don't want to. It's not our money. It's their money. Our job is to give them the best sound logical advice. And what I want to touch on with this is just because you have the emotion doesn't mean that you need to pay attention to the emotion. I just want people to know we're not afraid of the emotion. Most advisors will never delve into that world with you. They stay in the world of logic and then they get pissed off when you don't do what they said that you should do, and they never address the emotion that was there. So it's like, why does anybody make these foolish decisions that we know are wrong? It's usually because of emotion. That's why it's happening. And so I think what people need to understand when we're delving into the emotion on the positive side of things with the attainment of their goals and what's that going to be like? What's that experience? What are you thinking? What are you feeling now that you're there? It's important to have that. And I believe what I've said, for a very long time when taking people through this, what is the future other than like memories that are yet to happen? Right, at some point, like the year 2032 is going to be here, and those goals that you set for 2032 are going to be upon you and then past. And that's now a past emotion, like that's a past memory, which you can generate emotion from. If I ask anybody who's listening right now, think about a moment when you felt absolutely powerful. You felt strong. You felt vibrant. Any of us could like kind of conjure up like a moment in our past where it's like, yeah, in this moment. And if you think about that moment, your physiological experience will change. Just thinking about a prior time when you felt that way. Or I could say conversely, think about a time where you felt ashamed or you felt guilty. It's like all of a sudden your emotion, your current body can change thinking about a memory, right? So all we're doing when we're talking with people in the emotional world with this like future goal attainment is we're just anchoring these things in the future that you can go visit and you can actually borrow that energy to get to where you want to go. That's freaking cool. But
Mhm.
there's a lot of experiences that people have had. So there's a reason why someone wants to have too much money in cash
Yeah.
just sitting there. There's
Yeah.
probably an experience that they had that we are not afraid of talking about with them.
Correct.
So
Yep.
our members need to understand, like, we are a place where you can feel safe talking about these things. We're not afraid of it. We'll dive into it with you. We won't judge
Mhm.
you about it, right? It's
Mhm.
irrational. They know it's irrational, probably, right? We're not going to judge them about it. So
Mhm.
to Bob's point, like either end of that extreme is probably not good, right? If you're too emotional about everything all the time, like that's not going to be good, but that's where passion lives, right? If all you are a logic all the time, you're going to miss so many of those things. So it's somewhere in the middle that meets out in the road to nowhere where that intersection exists. We're happy to live out there with you and help you explore it.
Mhm.
Yeah. And that has been really neat to watch you, Bob, be so non-judgmental to people, even when you're like, this is the right path, but like you said, it's your money and we're just here to be your trusted advisors. And there will be no ill feelings if you choose something else. We're just going to show you a very clear, like, here's the outcome, but we respect your decisions. And
Yeah.
Mhm.
people aren't used to that.
No.
Right.
Well, and I think also too is that when their goals or their outcomes don't meet what we've all agreed to, that typically is because of the emotional side. So now they get to experience emotionally not attaining the goals that are there because they didn't allow some of the logic to come into it, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the two meet. I can't force them to understand that. They have to experience it themselves. So our
Mhm.
job is to be patient, to be there for them, to nudge them, to continue to make sure they're going in the direction that they've chosen, but also be accountable to blame, right? Be accountable to what the outcome is. Both parties. We make a mistake. You've seen it. I've dropped the ball. My bad. I dropped the ball. Here's what we're doing to move forward and pick that ball up and do what we need to do. That is us teaching them to do the same thing, right?
Mhm.
We're all human. Nobody expects perfection from each other. That's what relationships are about, right? Is going, and that's the emotion aspect of it. Your relationships aren't logical,
Right.
right? They're emotional that both together can go seek out that logic. And that where they meet it together in the middle of nowhere, what that nowhere is, that is actually somewhere. That is their goals. That is
That's
the
the, yeah,
attainment, right?
that's where they want to be.
That's
And
where you want to be.
one of my mentors, Bill Backrack, used to say that he used to ask this question all the time. Are you willing to do the work your goals require? They're not our goals. These are your goals. Are you willing to do the work your goals require, which could include some work emotionally? Like, how do I get beyond this thing that I'm uncomfortable with? How do I do this? How do I tighten up the belt when I need to so that I can live the life that I want to live? I think that's the big question. And Doc, you're the only one who can answer that for yourself. I think a lot of people, when they start working with Terra Firma, one of the things that we hear is like, wow, that's a lot. That's a lot to work with your team. And my first response is, compared to what? You're paying hundreds of thousands more in taxes than you need to be. That sounds expensive to me. So the first step might be for you, hey, this is uncomfortable and I need to work through this to get the team in place so that I can get to where I want to go. And then that's just the beginning of the journey. So I think that's the big question is, are you willing to do the work your goals require? And some of that might feel uncomfortable to you with dealing in all the emotion. I just want you to know we are not uncomfortable with that.
Great conversation. Thank you both for lending us your wisdom. Doc, thank you for listening. Hit subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Share with your friends, and we'll talk to you next time. Until then, go be a wealth maverick.